Have you ever been accused of something just because of the way you look? Before you could even open your mouth? Imagine this. You're cold, hungry, homeless, and black. You see a wealthy man drop his wallet on the sidewalk. You pick it up and hurry after him, just trying to do the right thing. But when you catch up to him, he spins around, looks at you and yells, "Thief!" In seconds, the crowd around you tenses. People grab their phones. Someone calls security. This isn't just about a lost wallet anymore. It's about how fast people judge and how deep racism runs, even when the truth is right in front of them. Stay with me, because the story I'm about to tell will leave you shaking your head and maybe questioning the world you thought you knew. Let me introduce you to Terrence. He's 52 years old, black, and homeless. He's been living on the streets of downtown Atlanta for the past 7 years, sleeping under bridges, in doorways, or sometimes just huddled on a park bench with an old blanket pulled up to his chin. Terrence wasn't always this way. Once, he had a steady job as a truck mechanic, a wife, and a little boy he adored. But after a factory layoff, a bitter divorce, and a series of bad breaks, everything unraveled. His savings dried up, his support system crumbled, and little by little, Terrence became invisible to the world around him. He spends his days quietly, head down, a battered coffee cup at his feet as he sits outside the subway station. Most people pass by without a glance. Some wrinkle their noses, some clutch their bags tighter, some cross to the other side of the street. And then there's Daniel Whitmore. Daniel's the kind of man you see on magazine covers. Mid-40s, sharp navy suit, polished shoes, perfectly cut hair. He runs a tech startup that's been featured on CNBC, lives in a high-rise overlooking the city, and drinks $7 lattes without blinking. He donates to charities at galas and talks about social issues over cocktails. But on the streets, he barely notices the people holding out cups. On this particular day, their worlds are about to collide, and not in the way you might think. Because what should have been a simple act of honesty turns into something far uglier. Something that peels back the thin, polite skin of the city and shows the raw, painful truth underneath. It was just after noon, and the sidewalk was buzzing. The steady hum of cars, hurried footsteps, a burst of laughter from a group of young professionals. Terrence sat where he always did, near the lamppost on 8th and Main, his old jacket pulled tight against the cold. His cup sat at his feet, but he wasn't watching it. He was watching people, or rather, watching through people. After a while, the faces blurred together. That's when he noticed the wallet. It was right there on the ground, just a few feet away. Black leather, half open, like it had fallen out of someone's pocket and landed wrong. Terrence blinked, confused. Had it just been dropped? He hadn't seen anyone. He'd been staring off, lost in thought. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. His fingers fumbled, his heart racing. "What do I do?" he thought. He stood up, glancing around, unsure who it belonged to. He turned left, then right, searching the sea of faces. For a moment, no one looked his way. People were too busy, too rushed. Terrence took a breath and raised his voice. "Hey, did anyone drop a wallet?" he called out. His voice cracked with nervousness, rusty from lack of use. "I just found a wallet here." A few people glanced over, but kept moving. Someone laughed. A woman gave him a suspicious look and tightened her grip on her purse. Meanwhile, down the block, Daniel Whitmore patted his coat pocket, frowning. His wallet, Gone. He turned, scanning the sidewalk, his pulse quickening. He retraced his steps, eyes sharp, his expensive shoes clicking on the pavement as he walked back. That's when he saw it. There, near the lamppost, stood a ragged-looking black man holding up a wallet. His wallet. Daniel's stomach tightened, his fists clenched. He stormed over, voice raised. "Hey, that's mine!" Terence turned, relief flashing across his face. "Oh, you're the owner?" he asked, stepping forward carefully, both hands holding the wallet out. But Daniel didn't see the relief. He didn't hear the kindness. He saw a black homeless man clutching his wallet, and his mind filled in the rest. "Did you go through this?" Daniel snapped, snatching it from Terence's hands. "Where's the cash? There was cash in here." Terence's eyes widened. "What? No, sir, I just found it. I swear I didn't open it." By now, heads were turning. A couple nearby slowed down. A man pulled out his phone, starting to record. A cafe worker peered out from behind the counter, watching. Daniel's voice rose, angry, sharp. "There was at least $500 in here. Where is it?" Terence shook his head desperately. Sir, I don't know. I swear on my life I just picked it up." But Daniel's jaw tightened, his face darkened. And Terence felt it, that heavy, sinking weight in his chest. This wasn't just about a lost wallet anymore. This was about him, about how they saw him, about the assumptions they were already making. And as the whispers started to ripple through the growing crowd, Terence realized with a sick, hollow feeling that no one cared what the truth was. Terence's hands trembled slightly as Daniel's voice rose sharper, harder. "I want my money back," Daniel said, stepping in close, his face tight with anger. Terence's throat went dry. "Sir, I didn't take anything. Please check the wallet. I just picked it up. I swear, I was calling for the owner." But Daniel wasn't listening. "You expect me to believe that?" he barked. "You were just standing here holding it? That's convenient." The tension in the air thickened. A small crowd had started to gather, people pausing with their coffee cups, heads tilted, whispering. A man nearby murmured, "I saw him holding the wallet when I walked by." A woman chimed in softly, "Typical. You give them an inch." Terence felt the heat rise under his skin. His face burned with humiliation. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but the words stuck. Would they even listen? The security guard from the bank was approaching now, his walk brisk, eyes sharp. "What's going on here?" Daniel turned to him immediately, waving the wallet in the air. "This guy was holding my wallet. There was a lot of cash in it. It's gone." The guard's gaze shifted, first to the expensive coat, the polished shoes, the businessman's angry face, then to Terence, worn jacket, unshaven, standing awkwardly with his hands still half raised. "Sir, can you step over here, please?" the guard said, motioning to Terence. Terence's heart pounded. His legs felt weak. "Please, I didn't do anything," he said, his voice trembling. "I just found it." But the eyes on him were cold, doubtful. A few more people stopped. Phones came out. Cameras blinked. Daniel crossed his arms, watching with narrowed eyes. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff. Part of him wondered, just faintly, could this guy be telling the truth? But the anger was too loud in his chest. The frustration of a lost wallet, the embarrassment of Haihish, aving to walk back and search for it, the irritation of seeing his money gone, it all boiled over, and it was easier to let it spill onto Terence. Terence's breathing grew ragged. Inside, panic clawed at him. He thought about running, just bolting away, but he knew how that would look. He tried to speak, to explain, but the words stumbled out broken. I was calling for the owner. I didn't see the money. I don't know who. But no one was really listening. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Yeah, sure." Another voice said, "Call the cops." And Terence's chest sank because he knew that once the police arrived, it didn't matter what he said. This wasn't just about a wallet anymore. This was about skin, about power, about being seen as guilty before you even open your mouth. And somewhere in that crowd, the real thief had long since disappeared, blending back into the rush of the city. But Terence stood frozen at the center of it all, feeling the weight of every eye, every assumption, every crushing judgment bearing down on him. The tension hung tight, pulling the moment out longer, stretching it like a thin, trembling wire, ready to snap. The air was heavy, thick with tension. Terence stood in the middle of the crowd, his hands trembling, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the city noise. The security guard was no longer calm. "All right, sir, we need to check your pockets," he said firmly, stepping closer. "If you took the cash, we'll have to recover it now." Terence's eyes widened. "What? No, I didn't." His voice cracked, raw with desperation. But Daniel stood off to the side, arms crossed, his face locked in cold suspicion. "Check everything," he told the guard. "His coat, his bag, wherever he hides his things." Another guard from the nearby bank approached. "We can check the area where he was sitting. Maybe he stashed the cash there." Terence shook his head frantically. "Please, I didn't take anything. I didn't." The crowd was restless now, people whispering, some pulling out phones to record. A woman muttered, "He's lying." Another nodded, "Of course he is. They always do." In the middle of this growing storm, something strange happened. A young man, no older than 20, stood at the edge of the crowd. His clothes were simple, his eyes wide, hands waving frantically in the air. But when he opened his mouth, no words came. He was deaf. The boy kept motioning, tapping his chest, pointing to the street, circling his hands, but no one paid him any attention. People nudged him aside, annoyed, thinking he was just causing a scene. But the boy's face twisted with urgency. He had seen something no one else had noticed. Terence, shoulders slumped, was being patted down by the guard. "Nothing here, sir," the guard muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. "We'll check his things," another added. Suddenly, the deaf boy ran forward, tugging hard at the guard's sleeve, pointing desperately down the street. His mouth opened in a wordless cry, hands flashing in rapid signs, eared face tight with frustration. The guard frowned. "Kid, you need to step back." But just then, the deaf boy pointed sharply. Down the street, weaving through the thinning crowd, was a slim figure, grey hoodie, hands buried in his pockets, walking briskly away. The deaf boy waved wildly, hopping up and down, pointing, mouthing words no one could hear. He was trying to tell them, "That's the guy." A bystander finally stepped in. "Wait, I think he's trying to say something important." Another voice chimed in. "Does anyone understand sign language?" Before anyone could answer, the guard's radio crackled. "Hey, we just checked the bank's CCTV, came the voice on the other end. "We saw the footage. It wasn't the homeless guy. A different man took the money. Slim, grey hoodie, headed eastbound." The guard froze. Daniel turned sharply. All eyes shifted, just as the grey hoodie figure quickened his pace, trying to slip away. "Hey!" the guard barked, breaking into a run. Another bystander dashed forward, grabbing the hoodie guy's arm just before he could disappear. Chaos erupted. Terence stood frozen, his breath ragged, heart slamming in his chest, Relief and shock flooded him all at once, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. The deaf boy beamed, still waving, still trying to show everyone what he'd seen. Daniel's face drained of color. He stared at Terence, at the man he had accused, the man he'd nearly crushed under the weight of his assumptions. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He looked away, his eyes falling to the pavement. The guards pulled the real thief from the side, radioing for backup. A small cheer rose from a few onlookers who had pieced together what had happened. And Terence? He just stood there, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. He hadn't said much. He hadn't fought back, or shouted, or begged. He had simply stood, arms shaking, waiting for someone, anyone, to believe him. It had taken a stranger with no voice and a security camera to bring the truth to light. But for Terence, the scars of this day, of what could have been, of what almost was, would linger long after the crowd drifted away. The street slowly settled after the chaos, but for Terence, the tremors were still inside him. He sat on the cold pavement, his head bowed, elbows resting on his knees. His chest rose and fell in heavy breaths. The guards had let him go. The crowd was thinning. And the real thief, the slim man in the hoodie, was now pinned against the wall, waiting for police to arrive. But the eyes on Terence lingered longer than they should have. A woman who had filmed the entire incident with her phone now lowered it, suddenly embarrassed. A man who had muttered "thief" under his breath turned away, avoiding Terence's gaze. Others just drifted back into the river of the city, their interest fading now that the spectacle was over. Terence stayed seated, his fingers shaking slightly as they rubbed over his worn pants. He wasn't sure if the shaking was from cold or from everything that had just happened. Daniel stood a few feet away, stiff, arms folded tightly across his chest. His face had softened, but he looked trapped in his own storm. Guilt, shock, maybe shame. Slowly, Daniel approached. His polished shoes clicked softly against the concrete. I didn't know, Daniel said quietly, his voice lower, less sure than before. I thought. He trailed off. Terence let out a long, rough sigh. You thought I took it. He finished for him, not angry, just tired. Daniel winced. Yeah. They stood in silence, two men from opposite worlds, the air between them filled with everything they weren't saying. Daniel shifted awkwardly. I'm sorry. Terence looked up, his eyes dark and steady. You ain't the first to look at me like that, he said softly, and you probably won't be the last. The words stung Daniel more than he expected. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing away. Around them, the city carried on, as if none of this had ever happened. The young deaf man stood nearby, smiling a little, proud that he'd been able to help. A woman in the crowd walked up and handed Terence a few folded bills, quietly pressing them into his palm. Thank you for being honest, she murmured, her cheeks flushed, as if trying to erase her own earlier doubt. Terence gave a small nod, his fingers curling slowly around the money. It wasn't about the cash. It was about being seen. For the first time all day, he felt like someone had seen him. Daniel stood awkwardly, hands in his coat pockets. Look, maybe, he started, then hesitated. Maybe I can get you something warm to eat, or help you find a place tonight. Terence shook his head, faintly. I'm all right, man. Thanks. He didn't say it out loud, but part of him wasn't sure if this offer was out of guilt or kindness. And honestly, he was too tired to figure it out. What mattered more was the way the moment sat heavy between them. A realization for Daniel, a deep confirmation for Terence. Daniel had thought himself a good man. He donated to charities, funded scholarships, sat on panels about social responsibility, but today, for the first time, he saw how quickly even a good man could fall into the easy, dangerous trap of assumptions. And Terence, he walked away knowing he had survived another day of being mistaken, misread, underestimated, not because of his actions, but because of his skin, his clothes, his circumstance. He carried that weight with him, like he had carried it every day for years. The city hummed on as the sun dipped lower, gold light spilling across the buildings. Life moved forward, but for two men who had collided by chance, the world would never quite look the same again. As the shadows stretched longer across the city, Terence walked slowly down the block, hands tucked into his frayed jacket pockets. His steps were heavy, not just from the weight of the day, but from the quiet, familiar ache inside. The ache of knowing the world too often sees your skin before it sees your heart. Daniel stood still, watching him disappear into the crowd. In that moment, both men carried something new. Daniel, for the first time in his carefully managed life, had been forced to see the walls he hadn't known existed, the ones he carried inside himself, built from years of assumptions, unchallenged beliefs, and the quiet comfort of privilege. Terence, on the other hand, walked away with no illusions. He had known the world's sharp edges all his life, but today had reminded him of something painful yet true. It didn't matter how honest, kind, or good he tried to be. To most strangers, he was still an easy target for suspicion, simply because of how he looked and where he stood. The city didn't stop. The trains still roared. The cars still honked. People still rushed past with their own worries. But for the two men caught in this brief, painful collision, something had shifted. And now, I want to ask you, the one listening, the one watching, what assumptions do you carry? When was the last time you caught yourself judging someone before you knew anything about them? If you were standing on that sidewalk, what would you have seen? These aren't easy questions, but they're the ones that matter. Because sometimes the most dangerous stories we tell aren't the ones we hear from others. They're the quiet ones we whisper to ourselves about who belongs, who's worthy, who's safe. If this story moved you, if it made you stop and think, please hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Post it on your social media. Send it to a friend or drop it in your group chat. And most importantly, I want to hear your voice. Have you ever been in a situation where you were misjudged because of how you looked, where you came from, or what people assumed about you? Have you ever caught yourself making a snap judgment you later regretted? Drop your story or your thoughts in the comments below. Let's make this more than just a video. Let's make it a conversation. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel. We share real stories that challenge, inspire, and open hearts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, sometimes the smallest moments can reveal the biggest truths.